Today we're visiting with Moritz Kothe, the CEO of Kununu. Kununu is like the Yelp for business with a dominant footprint in Europe. We'll be talking about his hiring philosophy, his use of probationary periods, which is a very European construct, but one that should be adopted in the US, and how to communicate the importance of talent down in the organization. I'm excited for you to meet him. I have the great fortune to be here with Moritz Kothe, and I didn't pronounce that right, but you said it's as close as most Americans get.
Yeah, I don't know if Mike is anywhere close to how I should pronounce Mike,
No,
but welcome to Kununu. It's great to have you.
Well, Moritz is the CEO of Kununu. Kununu is completely in the talent space. You're a talent expert, and as I understand it, you improve communication between employees and corporations. Tell us a little bit about Kununu.
Sure, thanks, Mike. So with Kununu, we have this idea of empowering people to choose the right place to work. That's our whole idea, and that's why we started actually in 2007. So it's been a while when we started in Vienna. Vienna is in Austria, Austria is in Europe. It's been great. What we do is we ask people that are experts as to what it's like to work, that know what it's like to work inside an organization, to share their perspectives, and then we put it on the platform where everybody can research organizations. And where we are today is every second job seeker in Europe is researching their future employer on Kununu. And we just expanded to the US 3 years ago, where we are on our path to really helping job seekers to make these job decisions that matter so much.
Oh, that is a fantastic mission. And you're making the world a better place by getting people in the right role.
Sure.
So in speaking with you, I had an opportunity to realize you barely use a resume during your hiring process. How do you think about hiring? How do you make sure you're getting the right people? What's a little of your process?
Yeah, and I wasn't 100% accurate in describing what we do. So we have an amazing HR department that what they do first is they look at resumes and they take a decision whether somebody is eventually qualified for a certain role that we are hiring for or not.
So it's you personally you're downgrading the resume yourself when you're diving in?
So I'm downgrading the resume. Yeah, that's correct. So I trust our HR team to take the decision on whether somebody is generally qualified or not. And once they make the call, when I do my first interview, and I typically do a 30 to 45-minute phone call, I really focus on trying to understand who that person is. The way I describe it to candidates that get on the phone with me is, I don't want to know what you are, because that's what people can read in your CV. I want to know who you are. And then I try to uncover what drives them nuts, and if they could perform at their best inside of Kununu.
And you're looking for that fit?
I'm looking for a fit, but I don't look for 100% fit. So don't know how to best describe it, but when you have this organization that has a certain culture, I think it can perform best if you add additional perspectives, slightly different flavors. So you need some kind of cultural fit, but you also want some edge and some cultural add in some aspects.
Do you ever ask any questions that are driving at their values or what inspires them?
Well, I ask them what motivates them, what drives them, and that way I get to what inspires them.
You get right at it. You just get right at it. What motivates you? What drives you?
Yeah, typically what I do when I do 30 minutes, we get on the phone and I say, what I'm interested is, I don't want to judge you as a person. All I want to figure out is if Kununu and you could be a match. And then I just ask them, what drives you? What motivates you? What drives you nuts?
Well, that's great. So I was talking with you and I was amazed. So I'm going to give a little background. So in Europe, some countries use a probationary period when they evaluate people because you have more of a culture of lifetime employment or long-term employment. So it's a much larger commitment, as I understand it, for employers. Tell us about how you've adopted the probationary period in Kununu and especially in the US market. I think our audience would love to hear that.
Sure. And the probation period is something that is not a Kununu decision or an employer decision. It comes by the law in Europe. So what happens is you hire somebody and for a certain period of time, you can let go of them. And after that period of time, which is 6 months, they have lifetime employment. And what we came to realize, also in Europe, that's where the whole thing started as an idea, is we often came across people where we assessed after 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months that they are not 100% fit for the role or too much of a stretch for the culture, which was a challenge for us because they were already in lifetime employment, right?
Yeah, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, so you're kind of stuck. It's difficult to take decisions and to move forward. It's also not great for the person because you keep them for 8, 9, 10 months rather than making fast decisions. And because of that, we forced ourselves into a process where after 6 months, we as a leadership team take a decision, would we hire that person again with the knowledge we have today, or would we not do it? And that's the process that we adapted for Europe, but we also expanded it to the US and we run it across Kununu.
And how's it working in the US? Because this probationary periods, most people, if you mention that to them, even if they're in the HR space, would be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and I think it's not so much about the name as it is about the process itself and the whole idea. So if you think about this process of companies vetting people and taking decisions on the hiring with certain level of information, I think it's good to force yourself into a routine where you have a checkpoint after a certain period where you've learned significantly more about that person, where you've seen that person acting in that job, and then take a decision on it.
Do your US managers, have they bought into it? Have they embraced it? Are they like, I'm glad we do this because you've given process to something that typically hasn't had process?
I don't think there's a pattern with regards to US versus Europe. There's some people that are more open to this idea for two reasons. Option one, they are more rational and objective, so they don't care about the relationship that much anyways. Or second, they are thankful for a process that they can use as an excuse for make decisions. So I think that can work in the favor and can have people lean towards liking this kind of process. But there's also a lot of people that have reservations about taking people decisions in general, and they don't adapt to this process.
Right. So, but because you have a process and you've committed to it, they must have to come along in some capacity.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have this process, you start to implement it, but still, I'm not the type of person that's forcing people to take certain decisions in a certain date. So even within a certain process, people find ways to take their own decisions and then say, okay, I will work on improving this person for a few months or weeks or not.
So if you're going to evaluate someone in the first 6 months, which, what happens if, in Europe you have a tougher decision, which is you don't want to enter lifetime employment if it's the wrong situation. But here in the United States, if someone is not, you wouldn't hire them again, you probably have to have a pretty robust performance or some sort of rubric that you use for measuring how people are doing. Like, what have you developed with your people?
Yeah, I think we had a quick discussion about that, and to be honest, we have this idea of cultural fit on the one hand side, but then when it comes to performance, there's certain roles where it's easy to measure performance by output and outcome. There's some others where it gets a little bit more tricky. Yeah. If we would rate ourselves on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being amazing, 10 being poor, I think we're at a 3 or 4 when it comes to assessing performance. However, the good thing is we collaborate as a team, and I think that's good for calibrating decisions and for getting additional perspective.
Yeah, if there's an outlier or there's a lot of momentum one way. That's great. If you, with respect to performance, when it's not there, how long are you coaching someone to maybe go from almost there to definitely there, versus making the tough decision on, hey, maybe this isn't working?
Yeah. So on the leadership team, so that's people that work with me directly, we have this rule of thumb where we use 1 quarter as a time frame to develop people and to see improvements. So we meet on a quarterly basis and really assess people, take decisions on whether we want to develop them, have to develop them or not. And then we look at that after 3 months again and take a decision on whether we saw improvements or not. And if we did, that's great. And if we didn't, then we sometimes make certain people decisions.
Right, yeah, which is always challenging.
Yeah.
So in Europe, you've got to go back and do the first review at 3 months. So you have 3 months to do an impact, right?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, we check in on a monthly basis and look at all the upcoming probation gates, is how we call it, because that's our decision gate. So every month we check in and look at the list of people and pre-evaluate, and then after 6 months there needs to be a decision. That's correct.
That's great. So my company doesn't know this yet, but they will. Maybe we're going to adopt a probation gate. It seems like a great idea.
Yeah. Well, just let me add one comment. Why it's a great idea and it's easy to adopt on the leadership level that I'm working with. We are currently facing this challenge of, okay, how do you expand it further down into the organization?
Sure. Yeah.
Because if you add a second layer of management, then the people managers that are managing people managers have to adopt this process, and you need more people to buy into this routine.
Well, so it's clear that you care very much about talent and people. How do you articulate the importance of talent management down in your organization? Because you get it, you're enlightened. You wouldn't be working for Kununu if you weren't, but one of your 25-year-old managers might not put the same value in it. Are you personally getting involved with that?
Yeah, I am. I am getting involved, and I truly believe in leading by example. We had this example the other day. We discussed, okay, how do we embrace this new culture? How can we create a movement? And then we discussed and we concluded it's not about creating a movement, it's about being a movement. So if we as an organization, everything we have is talent, right? We have a little bit of IP, we have tons of data that we sit on, that we know what it's like to work inside of organizations. But then really talent is what makes the difference. And if I focus on it, and if I have this routine and spend time with the people that I work with to discuss it, I think that can have an impact. And the more that people see it, they will adapt to it. And yeah, I won't force them, but I hope they see the benefit and see that it makes sense.
Well, that's awesome. I've learned so much in our time together. Moritz, thank you so much. This was great. It was
great
for you to be sharing some brilliant insights.
Thank you, Mike.